Namaste. A very warm welcome to Vedic Astrology Masterclass series. I'm Miss Jyoti and I'll be your host for this session. Today's masterclass will be given by Sat Siri Khalsa ji. She will be teaching about moon phases and timing of wars. Sat Siri Kaur Khalsa is a highly regarded Jyotish practitioner as well as teacher of Kundalini Yoga and meditation. An honors grad of Harvard University, she began the spiritual path with the guidance of Siri Singh Sahib Yogi Bhajan and the practice of Sikh Dharma and Kundalini Yoga. Within that path, she was drawn to the tutelage of Vedanga Jyotish and was very fortunate to become an early student of Pandit Sanjay Rath. Satsiri Kaur has lectured around the world on many topics in Vedic astrology about health, wealth, spiritual and physical healing, and family relationships. She was named a Jyotish Kovid by the Indian Council of Vedic Astrologers under Dr. B.V. Raman, who sparked the renaissance in Jyotish studies in the West. She has been honored also as Jyotish Brihaspati and as Jyotish Medhya Prayag. Satsiri ji is one of the select member of Jaimini scholars teaching as per the lineage of Sri Achyutananda of Puri. She is a mentor for both Parashara Jyotish course and Jaimini scholar program and has an online introductory course. She is a former vice president of the Council of Vedic Astrology. A very warm welcome to you, Satsiri ji. Uh, Kindly note that any questions that the audience might have can be typed and posted in the comment section. At the end of the session, the speaker will answer them one by one. Satsiri ji, over to you.
Thank you, Jyoti. Namaste. So I would like to first tune in before starting the presentation. And I'm going to call on the Guru. From Sukhmani Sahib, we say this prayer. Ad Gure Name, Jagad Gure Name, Sat Gure Name, Siri Guru Deve Name. And so happy everyone who can join. This is going to be some research that I have been working on, and the specific format of it was sparked by a book put out by Dr. B.V. Raman. So it's very interesting that I got invited to give this talk today. And I'm going to use some rules from an article in a book that he published. So this is in celebration of his 110th Jayanti, very auspicious. He's given so much to the world, and my personal path, as mentioned in the introduction, has been very blessed to have great teachers, great masters, and my spiritual teacher and my Sikh Dharma and my great Jyotish guide and mentor, Pandit Sanjay Rath and Sarbani are seen here. So, and it's very interesting that when I was just a fledgling, brand new astrologer, Dr. B.V. Raman, a long time ago, Dr. B.V. Raman came to America and he attended a Jyotish conference that I was at, and I got to meet him in person. And it was, it was a memorable event for me, very inspiring. And interestingly, I was wearing my turban that day, and I had my Adi Shakti pin on my turban, which I'm wearing again today. And Dr. Raman looked at my turban and he looked at the pin and he said, "What is that?" And I said, that is the symbol of I'll show it on the next slide. This symbol here, this is the symbol of the Adi Shakti. And, it's both in Sikh iconography, it's very important. And this particular one has battle axes added to the symbol of the Adi Shakti. So this is a symbol of the warrior, the Adi Shakti as the warrior goddess, the divine feminine as the infinite and as the goddess of all. So it's very appropriate for this presentation today, in which we are looking into the subject of war. And so this book was put out in 1994 called Planets and the Next World War. It was a collection of essays, and it was in it all the scholars, all the astrologers who wrote there were all asked to consider whether there would be a new world war in the year 2000, which was coming up. And so most of them wrote articles saying, yes, there would be a terrible war. And of course, the year 2000 did not have a terrible war, but the following year, 2001, had the 9/11, Trade Center disaster and all the war that followed from that. So they were just off by 1 year because nobody looked beyond 2000. So this kind of thing happens to astrologers all the time, leading us to be very humble in the thought that we can predict definite things. And yet always when we study things in hindsight, we find the complete divine language that Jyotish is, and that it explains everything, but often with our limited minds, we cannot see it going forwards. But in this collection, the last article I found the most valuable. It was, let's see, I'm sorry, I don't have the author's name. I have not heard of him. I do not know him. Maybe others do. His name is Jaya Mohan D. Kurupu. And so he wrote an article that gave these rules that I'm basing today's study on. He gave 3 rules for predicting the outbreak of war in, over the span of hundreds of years, how to know which particular year or years would find these major wars. And the most important part of the rule was it was based on the conjunctions of Sun with Jupiter, Surya with Guru in the sign of Sagittarius, Dhanush. But unfortunately, and there's a total of 3 rules, which we'll come to. Unfortunately, he did not talk about what classical author had explained this. So leaving me to speculate and hoping that some more knowledgeable pundit, scholar, maybe my guide, will come and tell the source of this. But anyway, I find it very useful. Maybe it relates to the great festivals like Kumbh Mela and Magha Mela, in which the Sun-Jupiter conjunctions are the basis for the timing of these great festivals, and they're mentioned in Puranas, and these are like river festivals. People come to the rivers and gather in huge numbers because of the transition of Jupiter into various signs, and as marked by the Yuti with Surya. And one other suggestion is it has to do with the struggle between the Devas and Asuras at the creation of the world. It was a tug of war that took 12 days, which is of the gods, which is 12 years in the human time scale, to resolve. Also, the sign, the Rashi of Dhanush, is extremely important. Dhanush is the Mula Trikona sign of Jupiter, and it is also known as the sign of war. Sagittarius is the great battlefield. And so that's kind of paradoxical because Jupiter, as we know, is our protector and the image of the divine and the giver of peace. But what happens when Sun comes together with Jupiter is a condition called stambhana, or paralysis. So Jupiter conjunct Sun becomes paralyzed. And so then we can think that here, being paralyzed in the sign of war, it is unable to do its function of giving peace. we also know the great story of Dhanush, where Sri Ram came, and Sita had lifted the bow of Shiva, and her father, King Janaka, said, all right, she will be married only to some great hero who also can lift the bow of Shiva, a very difficult task. So when Sri Ram and his brothers came to visit the court of King Janaka, they asked him to lift the bow of Shiva, which he easily did. But as he lifted it, the bowstring, and as he was getting ready to string the bow broke. So he broke the bow of Shiva in the middle. And the instant that happened, a great sound arose like the roar of a storm. It was like an earthquake. It made the mountains shiver and shatter, and all the people, stunned, fell down unconscious, except Vishvamitra and the two Raghavas. So we see in this story the impact of war. That is what war is. The entire earth shakes and lives are lost and people suffer tremendously. So as Lakshmi can only be stationary near Vishnu, so Sita can only be stable with Ram. So there's a lot in that story to be deeply studied. But so those are the things that are in the background of why major wars will break out in eras. Every 12 years, Sun and Jupiter become conjunct in Sagittarius. And so the possibilities for a war to break out is, first of all, it would happen within those 12 years. And checking my research, I went back as far as 1818, just quickly examining every Sun-Jupiter conjunction. And in fact, the full 3 conditions were met only 4 times since 1818. And true enough, those 4 times show the 4 major periods of war we've had in history. So the 3 rules are: Sun must be conjunct Jupiter in Sagittarius, and at that moment of that holy conjunction, either of the tamasic grahas, Mars or Saturn, has to be in its own sign. So the tamas has to be in force and in power. And so Mars can be in Aries or Scorpio, Saturn can be in Makara or Kumbha. And then the third very interesting condition is that over the next year, approximately 1 year and 1 month later, Sun again will join Jupiter in the sign of Capricorn, Makara. And the condition is that conjunction in Makara may not be, it must skip over Dhanishta Nakshatra. So it could be in Uttarashada Nakshatra, it could be in Shravana Nakshatra, but it may not be in Dhanishta. If it is in Dhanishta Nakshatra, which is ruled by Lord Shiva, which has the Damaru, which has the exaltation of Mangal, war will not occur if that following Sun-Jupiter conjunction is in Dhanishta. So true enough, checking back over the research, each time since 1818, when there was one that had conditions 1 and 2, but also did have a conjunction in Dhanishta, there was no war. So again, it's confirming these 3 preconditions. So we see the major wars that have happened since 1818 were World War I, and World War II. The third time was the after, let's see, right now I'm not thinking of the exact date, but the period of the uprising of Al-Qaeda. And that particular period, I'm not using that chart as an example because it was very diffuse. The war scattered over many places. And also in the same era, there were the wars in the Balkans, which were very serious. So that was interesting, but we won't use that one as a case study. But we will use the latest one, which we are currently in, which is Russia invading Ukraine, which has become like a proxy war with numerous countries involved behind the scenes. So these are the 4 times that the 3 conditions have been present, and each of the 4 times a major war has erupted. So we'll see now we'll study a couple of them to see how we see the start and then how we will be able to predict the end of these bad, awful periods. So for this study, since it can affect any country around the world, I followed the advice in the Surya Siddhanta, which says for mundane charts, set the lagna at one of the 4 Surya Kendras. You know, when we track the passage of the sun over the globe in a 24-hour period, its 4 important kendras are located at 4 parts 90 degrees apart that we can spread out over the map of the globe. And so we consider the one in the far east as the sunrise for the entire world. And it's called in Surya Siddhanta Yama Koti, the rains of Yama. The noon for the world is in Ujjain, which is above India and Central Asia. Sunset for the world is in Romaka, which is a point just west of the Horn of Africa, just to the west of Europe. And then finally, midnight, the darkest part of the sun's day, is in Sipuri, which covers the Western Hemisphere. So I think explains why it's kind of the spiritually dark half or quarter of the world is falling over the Western North and South Americas. So we can see this graphically shown where we have Yamakoti in the east, sunrise, and Ujjain is noon, and Romaka is sunset, and Siddhapuri is the dark midnight. So all of the charts in this presentation will be following Surya Siddhanta and will be set for Yamakoti. Yamakoti is, it's a mythical city, but its coordinates, we can know those and therefore reconstruct where Yamakoti should be, which is 0 degrees on the equator, 0 north or 0 south. And the longitude is east, 165 degrees and 46 minutes east. And the time zone will be 12 hours east, so as far east as it can go. So that is the beginning of the day for the world. And so we're using that as our lagna for every chart in the study. That way they're all constant. They're all interrelated. We can totally understand the changes from one horoscope to another as we see how the rules play out by giving that one steady reference point at Yamakoti. If you try to look for it in your software, there's no, I think the nearest country to start to find it, probably you just need to enter those coordinates. But it is your current day. There's an island, I think, called Nauru up east and north of Australia, which is closest to Yamakoti. Okay, so looking into the charts. We'll start, our first study will be World War I. And this is the Sun-Jupiter conjunction came in 1912, the first time since 1818 that fulfilled all three conditions. It's amazing what, so it's a relatively rare thing. And so setting the chart for Sun-Jupiter exactly joined at Yamakoti. We have Mangal in its own sign. So condition number 2 is met. Mangal is in Vrishchika with Mercury, which makes Mangal very unhappy. And in the following 2 years, the Sun-Jupiter conjunctions did not occur in Dhanishta. So everything is there, and war indeed broke out. So war began on 4th of August, 1914, when Germany invaded Belgium. Now we're interested, so we can see why war breaks out following those rules. And there's one other little trigger that I'll mention on the next case. But our interest is, how do we find the end? How do we end these wars? So using the Sun-Jupiter conjunction chart, I'm using a compressed dasha, Shula dasha. Shula dasha is a very straightforward dasha with 9 years per sign normally, but we're compressing it. So it'll just be 1 year per sign. And Shula dasha is appropriate because it's a dasha often used for the timing of death and life, and it's got the energy of Lord Shiva. So in this chart, the first house would be, the first year would be the first house. So that would be 1914 to 15. December of 1912 till December of 1913. And then the second house would represent the time December 1913 till December 1914. So war broke out in that second year. So there we see Shukra, which is a big malefic for Dhanush Lagna, and it's in an exchange with Shani. So the war broke out in that second year, and it ended when it came to Shani, the 6th year. So in 1918, the armistice with Germany was signed. So that would fall in the 6th house. This is the first year, second year, third year, fourth year, fifth year, 6th year. So we see that linkage with that important parivartana going on. So it's always a hugely joyous experience when a war can end. This war had involved so much suffering. And we see the chart for the moment of signing the armistice, but instead of setting it in, I think it was signed in France, but we're setting it for Yamakoti to keep our steady, consistent approach from the world point of view. So what do we see? We see Surya is trining Guru. So Guru is the station points for Jupiter when Jupiter is most powerful is when Surya trines Guru. So instead of being in paralysis, Sun and Jupiter are magnifying the power of Jupiter. And so Sun with Venus is trine Jupiter. And we see also that Rahu is conjunct Mercury. And in the original chart of the Sun-Jupiter conjunction, we had seen Mars, right, where Rahu is with Mercury, a very unfortunate combination. But now Mercury plus Rahu neutralizes instead of creating a huge Mars problem. I mean, Rahu with Mercury instead of Mars with Mercury allows for peace to come. It's like armistice, stop. And Saturn is at the 5th degree of Leo. Now, this is very interesting because this is one other principle that I want to bring into this talk today, which is, this is something that we can find in Gemini in the fourth Adhyaya, the importance of moon phases. So we all know human beings have a gestation cycle of 9 months, and Gemini teaches about that in the fourth Adhyaya. And sutras of Gemini are applicable universally. So this 9-month gestation cycle is often found in the sequence of events from one related event to another. They will come in 9-month intervals. And this has to do with a very little known but extremely important fact, astrological fact, that the degree of the moon phase will repeat every 9 months in this beautiful rhythmic pattern. So if there's a new moon, let's say at 5 degrees of Leo, Simha, 9 months later, there will be a first quarter moon, or, it will be S8 in the Tithi system. It's the quarter moon. Again, that quarter moon, 9 months after the new moon with the moon at 5 Leo, will have the quarter moon at 5 Leo, or there can be a few degrees off, usually not more than 5 or 6 degrees one way or the other, but sometimes it'll be exactly on 5 degrees Leo. Then again, 9 months later, there will be a full moon. And if you check the degree of that full moon, again, it will be at 5 degrees Leo. And finally, another 9 months later, there will be the third quarter moon, K8 in the Tithis, and that moon will be at the same degree, 5 degrees Leo. And so I'm not going to go into great detail on this first case study, but if we had looked at those, the important degree of the moon that kept repeating was 5 degrees of Leo. And so we see in time when Shani came to 5 degrees of Leo, that allowed the conflict to end. So we'll come back to that more to see the relevance of that. There were also important other transits when World War I ended. Jupiter was opposite the natal Lagna. So here we have the original Sun-Jupiter conjunction that started everything. And here we have the chart for the moment of the armistice. And we see Jupiter is in the Lagna exactly opposite the degree it was in at the Sun-Jupiter conjunction. Also, Mars is opposite Jupiter, and it's on the Lagna of the original Sun-Jupiter. And we see that Rahu, as mentioned, is right on where natal Mars was. And then we see that Shani is in a square to Shani. And let's see here, the degree is shown as 15. So I'm not sure. I have to go back and check that, but that might have been where the new moons were, the moon phases were. So anyway, the point is that in that Sun-Jupiter conjunction that started the whole thing off, the war, the ending of the war must respond and correct and end that situation and completely undo the war. So now we'll just quickly go through World War II. And World War II, the Sun-Jupiter conjunction that spawned that war happened in 1936, 28th December 1936 in Yamakoti. And we see here that the Lagna was Vrishchika, with the conjunction in the second house very badly afflicted by the presence of a debilitated Rahu. Not only that, it was a full moon eclipse had happened or would happen in a few hours. And so the nodes are Nicha, And we have the eclipse with moon in the 8th house, terrible, terrible condition. And Saturn, the second rule, Saturn or Mars must be in its own sign. So true enough, Shani is in Kumbha, and it's aspecting the Lagna by Graha Drishti. And then the third, more hidden condition, looking at the ensuing year or two to make sure there is no conjunction in Dhanishta. That is true. There was no conjunction in Dhanishta. So the war signature is fully present and war will break out. And just for the record, that eclipse of the full moon happened in the 13th degree, which will be significant. The 13th degree of Mithuna opposite Dhanush. So then if we just, as a preliminary, look at the timing using compressed Shula Dasha. The Sun-Jupiter conjunction happened at the end of 1936, and the war broke out in September 1939 when Germany, again, invaded Poland this time. And so this was allowing this 1 year per sign. The war began in the third house, the third Rashi, Capricorn, where we have Venus and Mercury. And then it did not end. It was a very long war. And it did not end until coming to the 9th house, which is ruled by the moon, the full moon eclipse, the moon in Purnima. So we see so one additional condition to the rules to know, once we have all the preconditions set, then we can also even fine tune exactly how soon after the Sun-Jupiter conjunction, the hostilities will commence. So it breaks out during one of the years while Shani is in its signs. So it can be, when Sun is conjoining Jupiter in either Capricorn or Aquarius, the signs of Shani, as long as it's not in Dhanisha. And the immediate trigger will be Mars or Saturn contacting Ketu. So either of the Tamashik Grahas comes together with Ketu, and the explosions begin. Okay, so here is the chart set at Yamakoti for the invasion of Poland. And it was Sun and Jupiter had conjoined in Satyabishaj before this time. And we see Shani came right to Ketu, then it's stationed. It didn't quite cross Ketu, but we can call it close enough to fulfill the trigger time. And it's an amazing chart for this outbreak of war. We see Mangal is on the Lagna, which is at 0 Makara. Mangal is there in exchange with Shani in Mesha in these angles. We have a terrible Sarpa Yoga here. And we have Jupiter in Marana Karakastana. Jupiter in the 3rd house is feeling intense weakness and pain. And Moon is with it, showing the humanity being pulled into this. And the Mercury is in the 7th house, also a bad place for Mercury. So Now, how did the conflict come to an end? Finally, not until, even though Hitler committed suicide in April of 1945, and even though Germany surrendered in April of 1945, this war was not over because the Japanese theater was still very active. And in fact, the atomic bomb was dropped in late August of 1945, 2 atomic bombs, and then Japan almost immediately surrendered. So the true ending of the World War was not until September 2nd, 1945. And so we set the chart for that. All the Japanese dignitaries came to the ship and signed the papers of surrender before the US general. But looking at what were the conditions that happened to end this terrible war, Saturn was conjunct Rahu instead of, so the war had begun with Saturn conjunct Ketu. Now Saturn is conjunct Rahu. And Rahu is at the exact original eclipse degree. That original full moon eclipse was at 13 Gemini. And when Rahu came there and Saturn crossed over it, then the war could end. And so we have this union of Mangal, Shani, Rahu, and Moon, all in Gemini, and they're in the 8th house. So the very same, this is like a miraculous, the exact lagna of the, looking at that Sun-Jupiter conjunction, what was the lagna? 5 degrees Vrishchika. Looking at the moment when the final surrender of Japan by Japan was signed, the lagna was 6 degrees of Vrishchika. This is incredible knowledge. And so, setting the charts for Yamakoti gives us this kind of insight that we could not get in other ways of trying to set lagnas in all different countries at all different times. So we see the incredible closure there. Sun is in the 10th house in Digbala and trining the exalted Ketu. So instead of a Sun-Jupiter trine, we have a Sun-Ketu trine, which is kind of like a stand-in because Ketu is at the original Sun-Jupiter conjunction and Ketu is being ruled by Jupiter and Ketu is exalted there. And we have, it's a Kala Amrita Yoga in which all the planets are leaving Rahu and going towards Ketu, so a movement towards peace, away from war. So some notable transits also on the outer planets were these I already mentioned. The lagna is the same. The nodes are exactly on the original Sun-Jupiter conjunction. Okay, so now we will try to look ahead in all humbleness, knowing that we don't venture to make predictions, but we just follow the logic. We follow these interesting rules and we see where it takes us. So looking at this chart that spawned this invasion and this horrible war that is going on, we see that the conjunction was on December 28th of 2019. And so many things have happened since then, including the world pandemic and just an incredible time period. But we're interested in the war aspect. So here we see the conjunction is happening in the lagna with Sun Jupiter very close to Ketu and Shani, and Mercury, which is the dispositor of Rahu. Mercury is the Vedic for a Dhanush lagna. So we have so many problems shown there And Shani Ketu is called Shraddha yoga. It shows great problem having to do with the elders and the past and history and the parentage. And so all of that is wrapped up in this lagna of Sagittarius. And the second condition is met because Mangal is in its own sign of Vrishchika. And the third condition was met because in the ensuing 2 years, the Sun-Jupiter conjunctions did skip over Dhanishta Nakshatra, and Shiva's blessing was not obtained. So we now, in the interest of studying the moon phases, so I'd like to, I want to note this, the solar eclipse before an event, or the closest eclipse, sun or moon, before the event can be very important. We need to note the moon at that lunar or solar eclipse. And then every 9 months from that date of that eclipse, we will find an event that will be like a new turn of the screw, a new development in the ongoing story or theme, the gestation of events. So here we have the sun moon in the 10th degree at 10 degrees Sagittarius. So we're going to note on that degree, 10 of Sagittarius, extremely important. And they're right with Jupiter and right with the Shraddha yoga and right with Mercury. So we have to remember 10 degrees Sagittarius. We're looking for that as the key to ending this conflict. And we can note down the dates when the 4 kendras of the 4 moon phases that will all be around close to 10 degrees Sagittarius. I listed them on the bottom here. And there's a book that has table sheets in a convenient layout. This book is called, what's it called? Oh, Lunar Shadows the Third. It's a very helpful book. It was put together by a wonderful Western astrologer, a lady named Dietrich Pessin. And so she has these tables showing these progressions through 9-month separation. And this table is in tropical zodiac, so we can ignore that, but we would have to transpose it to sidereal zodiac. But for example, if there's a new moon in 12 Pisces in March of 2022, then 9 months later, in November of 22, there will be a new moon within 5 or so degrees of the same 12 Pisces. There it is in 8 degrees Pisces. And then 9 months later, there will be a full moon, again, close to 9 or 12 or 8 or 10 Pisces. There it is. And then finally, 9 months later, there will be a third quarter moon, last quarter moon, again at 9 Pisces. And then if you still want to follow the thread of an event, you can look forward. So from May 30th, 9 months more would be about February of 2025. And around, you look for the new moon and you will find another new moon close to 9 or 12 Pisces. So this is an amazing weaving of gestations of events that Gemini has told us to study, and that is in this pattern going on forever. And in this table of this book that this author so helpfully supplied, the eclipses are marked in bold. So she calls them moon families because, they are linked together, which is very appropriate because we can say it is also the human gestation cycle. And so these families that include a new moon eclipse or a full moon eclipse will be very heightened, very important. Those eclipses will bring really, key events. So so that is in the background of how I am doing the research to try to figure out when this Russia-Ukraine conflict can end. So checking the rules, we already saw the 3 conditions were met, and then we need a trigger. The calamity will break out during one of the years following 2 or 3 years, there can be some drift there, when Sun is joining Jupiter in one of the signs of Saturn, Capricorn or Aquarius. Then the serious bad things will start happening. And there will be an immediate trigger, which will be Mars or Saturn contacting Ketu. So we can see for this invasion that it happened because the starting of the war was actually not it. The Mars had gone over Ketu a little earlier. It had actually transited, I think it was, hopefully I have it written on one of these slides, but it happened about in December of 21 instead of the invasion itself happened on February 24th, 2022. And, the time of that is precisely known. And here we have it set for Yamakoti instead of either Moscow or Kyiv, Ukraine. We're setting it for Yamakoti. And note that the Lagna degree is 10 degrees Gemini. So we had seen already to mark the importance of 10 degrees Sagittarius and 10 degrees Gemini. So indeed, that was the outbreak of the war. Now, as far as this trigger, Mars had transited Ketu on December 14th. Within our period while war is getting ready to break out, Mars went over the Ketu. And what happened then? Russia already began massing the troops on the border with Ukraine in December. And Putin, announced that he was not going to allow Ukraine to join NATO. And Joe Biden announced to the world that Russia was preparing for war. And so many signs were coming that war was going to break out. So the trigger was a little bit earlier as the Mars went over the Ketu. But then the actual first bombing began on this date with the Lagna at 10 Gemini. So now, because we want to study these moon phases, for any event like this, we can note which phase of the moon is going on when our event happens. So the moon quarter was a third quarter moon, K8, Krishna Ashtami in the Tidis. And it was the third quarter moon exactly. So we're doing the chart just for that exact third quarter moon so we can find another very important moon degree to watch throughout the ensuing 9-month events as events unfold. So every 9 months, there will be a lunar phase close to 11 Scorpio. And so we have a list of 2 important degrees, 11 Scorpio and 10 Sagittarius, that we are watching to know where our ending of battle will be. So just doing our compressed Shula Dasha, looking at the Sun-Jupiter conjunction, the war broke out, allowing 1 year per sign. So we're starting from here is December of 2019 till December of 2020. This is December 2020 till 21, and this is December 21 till 22. So this is the house, the third house where the war happened. And so it's happening in Kumbha, which is ruled by Saturn and Rahu. And then we're looking for the end. So this would be, so Kumbha is there, December of 22, coming up in a few months, we'll begin the Rashi or the sign of Pisces for 1 year. And then December of 23 will be Aries. So one clue is that Pisces and Aries are the end and the beginning of the zodiac. So that's a very important junction there that we have to examine more closely using the eclipses and looking for these degrees of 10 Sag and 11 Scorpio to see when can we predict an end. So we also want to look for outer planets contacting 10 Sag and 11 Scorpio. Now, doing this, checking our ephemerises, we find there are no outer planet direct transits, by Shani or Mangal or Jupiter either, just 10 Sagittarius or 11 Scorpio for the next several years. So we can't find that as a helpful answer. And so since those eclipse degrees are not giving any easier, obvious answer, we should study some of the other eclipses involved that have, been involved in the beginning of the war. So here is the list of eclipses, solar and lunar, from now for the next few years to see when can we predict the end. And we see, in October of this year, we will have a solar eclipse followed by a lunar eclipse. Then next spring, we will have solar followed by lunar. And then October of 23, we have solar followed by lunar. And then interestingly and significantly, the pattern will change. The next pairs of eclipses reverse the order so that instead of the solar preceding the lunar, it will reverse, it will flip, and the lunar will precede the solar. So that's an important wrinkle in time that right there, that is very significant. So we can hint that some big change will be occurring after this pair of eclipses in October of 23. But it's just a hint at this point. Now, what we have to do then is cast the charts for each of those eclipses in this first group of eclipses, these 6. See if we see any great, outstanding, obvious thing saying, wow, this is relating back to the original chart. This should correct everything. So doing that, which I will not show all those charts, but what came up with as the fascinating red letter jumping off the page chart is this one, which in Yamakoti is 29th of October. More in the West, it might be 28th of October as the dating goes. So we have a full moon eclipse on this date, 29th October at 8:25 in the morning in Yamakoti. This is the eclipse, and look what we have. We have that fateful degree of close to 10 degrees Scorpio is the Lagna. And we wanted to find 11 degrees of Sagittarius. So we don't have that, and we don't have any outer planets going near there, but what we do have is 2 very important special Lagnas. Special Lagnas, as described by Praja, are extremely, meaningful as far as time and work being done and so many things. We study those in our Praja courses. So we have that, we have the Hora Lagna and Varnada Lagna are close to the 10 degrees of Sagittarius. So we have Scorpio activated, we have Sagittarius activated. Then we can look at other things. We have the moon at 11 degrees of Aries. So it's trine and it's in a Rashi Drishti to the Scorpio. We have, it's trine 11 Sag and in Abmukha Drishti to 10 degrees Scorpio. We have that Jupiter, Moon, and Rahu have reached that Lagna of the invasion chart. And we also see a Sun-Venus exchange, so we want these benefics to pull us out of the momentum, the horrendous momentum of a war. We want it to pull us out into peace. So if this is going to be, this seemed to jump off the page to me. And so if this is going to be the one that marks the ending, total ending of the war, and wars can culminate, that's still a year away, which is pretty dreadful if you're, in Ukraine. But things can culminate much earlier. For example, in World War II, we saw how Hitler committed suicide and the Germans stopped fighting in April, but it wasn't until September, after dropping the atomic bomb, that the Japanese also surrendered. So, but still, the culmination had happened long before the actual final surrender in many ways. So again, the tides of war ebb and flow, and things can turn, in different ways. And so we may already be in that process, but it still may take a year until this final eclipse for both sides to agree, yes, the war is over and papers are signed. So we should look at this moon degree and take this moon family and go backwards through the gestation cycle. This adds to our list. So now we have 11 of Aries plus 10 of Scorpio and 11 or 10 of Sag and 11 of Scorpio, the three warlike signs. And let's go backwards and see when the earlier moon phase happened related to it. And was there a high point in the timeline of this war? And also we can look at Sarbato Bhadra chakra, but which we're not touching that today. Now, if this is happening in 2023, October, this will be the fourth house from the Lagna of the original conjunction sign. It will be the Pisces year, and the Lord Guru, Jupiter, will be in Aries, retrograding right here. So that's also significant. Okay, so going backwards in our lunar gestation history, the before that full moon that we've picked out, we see there was a first quarter moon, which will be in January 2023. We have not gotten there yet, but we go back 9 months before that, and we find the new moon eclipse, so it's very important. And this happened on the 1st of May, 2022. So this has already happened. And we have to ask, was this a big turning point? And indeed, yes, this was the worst ferocity of the war. This was when Mariupol was razed, bombed to the ground, and then all the civilians and soldiers went into the steel plant called Azovstal steel plant. They all went in there and were sieged. The siege went in for several weeks, and it was grabbing the headlines around the world, and it was terrible. And it looked like Ukraine had not a chance, and it was a terrible disaster for Ukraine at that point. So we can say, yes, this is the kind of thing we're talking about, that when we follow the story of an event, we will find these key highlights at these moments related to the gestation cycle, the moon family. And so, yes, 1st of May was definitely an important turning point. And that gives us more confidence that going forward, this 29th October 23 will be important, because this is an important family and it has eclipses in it. So yes, the siege of Azovstal was piteous, and people lived in there and starved in there. And so we see then that lunar degree. So we see when we go back to that new moon eclipse of May 1st, the moon was at 16 Aries. So, as I had mentioned, there can be a variation by 5 or 6, usually not 10, less than 10 degrees. So, the one was at 10 Aries and this was at 16 Aries. That's the acceptable little spectrum around where the moon degree will fall. But so we see that eclipse. Then, going back to this target for our prediction here, again, we see this Scorpio Lagna. We see this close to 10 degrees Sag, these special Lagnas. We see the moon in this full moon eclipse. We see Jupiter is at 16 Aries, so wanting to be involved with this piece. And Jupiter, Moon, and Rahu are on the Lagna of the invasion chart with the Sun-Venus exchange. So just again, looking for a moment at this, this is the Sun-Jupiter chart. So we see all this relevant energy will be in Aries and Libra, and there will be Sun-Venus will be in Leo and Libra. So not having any outer planets contacting them, this is really the closest we can get to having a map that says, yes, we have corrected the initial bad condition. So we can expect that it will be late in the 4th year, with the 4th Bhava, Pisces Rashi, with the Lord Jupiter in Aries on a relevant point. So right around that area of 28th of October 23. And, so just by doing this study, I just wanted to punctuate that eclipses are punctuation marks in the sentences written by time or kala. So this has been a study of how we see, when we can expect wars to break out, and then when we find the right eclipse to put the full stop at the end of an era. And then, so then to try to narrow that down even further, we would use Sarvatobhadra Chakra. So in another presentation I'm going to do in the next month or so in another venue, I'm going to try to study that using Sarvatobhadra Chakra. So I really want to thank the Astrological Magazine for hosting this. And it's been really enjoyable to do this study and see the how all these indicators come together and give us a new way to understand how to time things. And it all started from that article by this associate of Dr. Raman. So, okay, so that's mainly everything I had. Maybe I'm a little bit early, but I hope you all have lots of questions to ask, because a little bit earlier than the appointed time. So, please bring up any questions. Okay, so I hope our organizers are hearing this. See message. Well, okay.
Yeah, thank you, Sat Siri ji. That was a very insightful class. We now move on to the Q&A session. The questions will come up on the screen. You can kindly read it out loud for the benefit of everyone and then answer them.
Okay. so Jyoti, I'm not seeing the questions.
The questions are displayed on the screen.
Oh, okay. I'm not seeing it. All I'm seeing are my slides. So maybe if you read the name of the questioner and the question, I can respond anyway. For some reason, it's not coming up on my screen.
Okay. Maybe you can also try minimizing your presentation.
Okay.
I will read the questions meanwhile. Shall I read out the questions, Sat Siri?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Why don't you read
There's
them?
a question from Vijay Bhaskar. Guruji, will Saturn in Rohini Nakshatra play any role in war as mentioned in scripture for Mahabharata war? Moon also lords Taurus and represents food, and Saturn restricts food supply during war.
Yes. So, if we look back at, I mean, yes, that is a famous dictum. And I did not, I didn't study it, and I don't think I found it. Like if I just quickly look back at the ones that we see, we can just see was Saturn in Rohini. Maybe it was in one of them. For World War I, actually, Shani was about to be, it was retrograding just behind Rohini. Let's see if it had been there when the war broke out. Let's see. Yes, I mean, that is a very good point, because I guess I don't have the chart for the actual outbreak of war. I thought I did. Let me see if I do here. No, this is the Sun-Jupiter conjunction. But we know, yes, Shani would have been in Rohini, because this is the ending. But we can tell the conjunction happened as Shani was retrograding just at 6 degrees, and after 10 degrees Taurus, it is in Rohini. So obviously, over the next 2 years, or a year and a half, it was going through Rohini. And so, yes, you're completely correct. But then if we look at World War II, let's check that chart. And there, Shani was not going to be in Rohini or anywhere around Rohini, either at the Sun-Jupiter conjunction or when the war broke out. The war broke out in this, let's see, September 1939. I think I didn't show that chart, but we know Shani was not there. So it's not always going to be true, but it might be relevant. And of course, now in Russia, Ukraine, it is not relevant also.
Okay, shall we move on to the next question, Satriji?
Yes.
There's a question from Mr. Gagan Sharma. Dear Guruji, what is the importance of 8th house from the point of eclipse, sun and moon?
Yes, we see that is also very involved in some of these charts. For example, for World War II, we had a full moon eclipse in the 8th house. So 8th house in Kalapurusha chart, the template, natural template, is the house of Vrishchika. So the warlike signs of Vrishchika and Mesha, Kumbha and Makara are very important. So that is another sign that the conflict is going to be extremely serious. Let's see, for Russia, Ukraine, this one, when this is for February 24th, when the actual bombing started, and we have Shani and Mercury, we have the Lugna Lord in the 8th house. And we have Moon, natural sign, Scorpio. So these are all, like additional confluent factors that pile up and show that we are going into a serious mess. But, these are all just in addition to these 3 prime principles that will have to be there for, kind of like the scaffolding, and then everything else can be built on top of it. Let's see, with World War I, the 8th house, let's see the conjunction. Not so much, but I don't have there the chart for the actual invasion day. But very likely it could be involved. Excuse me 1 second. Okay, so next question, unless you have anything else to say about that.
So the next question is, do these lunar phases of moon, 9-month gestation period, more and more countries get involved at these points? In the research, did it occur?
Yes, it's like a, it's like a snowballing effect. But it can be a story, and it's just very interesting. Like, I'll give a very current and painful example. Let me just turn off this phone. Hold on 1 second. Okay, sorry. So, not only for war, but this is just it's a sutra of Gemini. So it applies in every realm. And this is a very full one currently. So we can look at, the big recent news is the passing of Queen Elizabeth of England. And so her husband, Prince Philip, passed almost 18 months ago. So that is in the lunar gestation cycle. So every 9 months. So he passed away on whatever date it was. And if we looked up the moon, we could look up the moon closest to moon, Kendra, which of the 4 phases. And then 9 months later, there was another moon phase that would be in Kendra to the one at his death. And that's about when the Queen's health started getting seriously bad. And then she just died now, another 9 months later. It's not quite 18 months, but I think if we looked at the degrees, we would find that they're all interwoven. So the point is that you can use this to study any important event in your life or your family's or anything. You look at an important event, a big milestone, and note the closest moon phase, and then track ahead 9 months to the next moon phase at that degree. And you will find some interwoven thing. So, if we're talking about world wars, and it can be very significant, that all these countries jump in, that could be it, but it can be anything. It's sutra, it's universally applicable. And so it's just, it heightens our appreciation for how events that, seemingly, like if something happens, then check what happened 9 months before it. What is coming up 9 months after it? Because then there is a moon linkage to that. And we know how important the moon is. So hope that answers that question.
So we have another question. What is the reason for considering, okay, I think it's another question being, please, can you name again the author of the article in B.V. Raman's book and the name of the author of the list of moon families?
Yes, will do. Who is the questioner, please?
This is from Mariela Casar.
Oh, hello, Mariella. Okay, so the author's name is, his last name is Kurupu, Kurrupu, Kurupu, and his first name, I believe, is Jaya Mohan. And the I think I have the book right here by this. It's a Western astrology book, very useful. It's called Lunar Shadows 3, and the author is a woman named Dietrich Pessin, Pessin.
There's a question from Fani Rama Sharma. Retrograded Mars and Jupiter play any role after solar eclipse? I think, do they play any role after solar eclipse? Retrograded Mars and Jupiter.
Okay, thank you. Yes, retrograde Mars and Jupiter definitely can be relevant. I'm not sure what you mean, whether they should be in relation to each other, but they will, in one way or another, influence the eclipse, so that will be relevant. If Jupiter is retrograde, that can be, and it's in an eclipse. Well, like we're seeing that for this future eclipse that I'm predicting. I'm going out on the limb and predicting this, but not predicting, but explaining the possible ending of the Ukraine conflict here, where we see, this eclipse is, Jupiter is retrograde, and it's with Rahu, and Rahu and Moon are in the eclipse, and Jupiter there is retrograde. So Jupiter is very powerful when it's retrograde. And here, instead of being conjunct the sun, when it goes into stambhana, it gets paralyzed, it gets unable to perform its function of giving peace. Here, it's as far away from sun as possible. And retrograde means it wants to correct all the errors of the past and, free us from this unfortunate period. So this is all happening. And, Shani is also retrograde that day. But yes, of course, we use those as important interpreters of an eclipse. And we see at that time, Mangal is in its peaceful sign. Mangal in Tula or Vrishabha, the signs of Venus, is non-violent, not wanting to give any violence. End the violence. It's with Ketu. Mars is saying, end the violence. So all of these factors help us to read the meaning of the eclipse.
So the next question we have received through another channel. So the question is, what is the reason for considering only Sun-Jupiter conjunction?
Well, we're also adding in these other connections, which, the other two conditions have to be there, right? I hope the question is clear on that. That is a very good question. And I humbly, ask for any great scholars who might know more than I have not been able to find the classical explanations of the meanings of conjunctions of Sun with Jupiter, but we just know they are extremely important. The Kumbh Mela is based on the conjunction of Sun and Jupiter in Aquarius, plus some other conditions. And that, is the time when the power of Lord Shiva can manifest in great glory. So there's also Magha Mela, Sun and Jupiter in Leo. So Sun and Jupiter conjunctions are extremely important, and in the Puranas and throughout history, they have been, followed and celebrated. So that's just what I had found, that because Sagittarius is this sign of war, and it has the bow where Sri Ram lifted the bow and broke it. So the war the war broke over the earth. I can't really give you any more classical source than that. But that Jupiter is getting paralyzed in that sign of war, Sagittarius. When Jupiter gets in Stambhana in the sign of war, normally Jupiter should be managing to bring peace in the face of war. But here he goes into Stambhana and he can't do his normal function.
So the next question is, do you see a possibility of a war triggered by China? If yes, when?
That's a great question. And the window for the war to get worse and worse and to, like that would be a huge expansion if China started fighting, either joined with Russia or went after Taiwan. This is my impression from doing this study. And again, I'm just a student, but that the calamity needs to break out while Sun is joining Jupiter in Capricorn or Aquarius. But we have already passed that period. The next Sun-Jupiter conjunction will be in Meena, in Pisces, right? I believe, or maybe it's Mesha. But we've already gone past the years in this 12-year cycle when Sun joined up in the Saturn signs. So that's the window of opportunity. If you check over all four wars that have been happening since 1814 or whatever the year was, the conflagration happened, it mushroomed into its worst form in the window when Sun was joining Jupiter in Capricorn and Aquarius. The basis was laid when Sun was with Jupiter in Sagittarius, and then it mushroomed and manifested while Sun was in Capricorn and Aquarius. Sun Jupiter was Capricorn and Aquarius. But now we are past that phase. So thank goodness I don't see another big, huge expansion of war happening. It's just a matter of containing and ending the war we have, which is in a way a proxy war because other nations are helping their sides. But I don't see I don't see new combats arising. Please God, hopefully.
We have one final question. What are the remedies we can undertake to prevent wars in the future?
Well, that's, I think propitiation of Guru is extremely important, and propitiation of Lord Shiva, and Shiva is Guru. So there are many ways to do that, and those are very important and serious questions. But it's very important that we do that, that we find our ways to, to connect to Guru, to Adi Guru, and to Shiva. And that way, we will protect the humanity. So, okay. So I think any other questions?
We have come to the end of the Q&A session. There are no more questions. Thank you again, Sat Siri ji, for the excellent masterclass.
Okay, thank you, Jyoti, and thank you for the whole team. Thank you for inviting me, and thank you for all the work that you do. And I hope you have many more of these classes and keep sharing wonderful knowledge that we are all studying and enjoying so much.
Thank you so much. Before we end this session, I would like to take this opportunity to inform the audience that next masterclass session is on Sunday, September 11, 2022. The class will be by Kshnati Nakshatra and he will be teaching us about Rahu, Ketu and Graha Karma. See you again there. Also, if you would like to stay informed about the masterclasses and similar sessions by the foundation, we encourage you to visit our website www.rrrf.in or join our Telegram channel. Thank you. Namaste.
Namaste. God bless.